Adaobi Essien stepped off the plane at Udoh International Airport, her heart a mixture of hope and dread. The humid air of Aqua Ibom wrapped around her like a familiar yet unwelcome cloak. After years studying psychology in the UK, she had imagined returning as a woman transformed, ready to embrace her family, her future, and her culture. But as the airport buzzed with the low hum of arrival announcements and distant laughter, a heavy weight pressed on her chest. Change had come to her, but not to her world back home. With her small carry-on in hand, Ada watched the busy taxi drivers negotiate fares and load luggage. No one came for her, no welcome party, no smiling faces. Her father, Chief Emmanuel Essien, had promised a driver, but promises in her family were often empty. Taking a deep breath, she hailed a cab herself, the city unfolding beyond the windows in a blur of color and chaos. Brightly painted buses weaving through dusty roads, vendors shouting their wares, palm trees swaying lazily. The taxi wound through Ikot Ekpeni Estate, a gated community where wealth whispered through manicured lawns and modern facades. The Essien mansion stood tall and imposing, its cold windows reflecting the afternoon sun, but not warmth. This was home, or what was left of it. As Ada stepped inside, the silence of the vast foyer engulfed her. No voices called her name. No hands reached for hers. Only the faint echo of her own footsteps. Madame Ifunanya Essien, her stepmother, passed by with a glance too quick and polite to be kind. Ada's father remained secluded in his study, eyes glued to papers, as if she were a stranger trespassing in his world. The daughter who had once been a quiet shadow in this house now felt invisible. The ache in Ada's chest deepened. She had crossed oceans to return, yet she stood alone in a place unchanged by time, but indifferent to her. That night, voices leaked from the kitchen, sharp whispers slicing through the silence. Ada's stepmother's words trembled with bitterness. "You're really going to do this? Sell her off like cattle?" Then, a voice she knew too well, her father's resigned reply. "I have no choice. Collins Udoh paid the debts. Now he owns me, and her." Her heart shattered. Collins Udoh. The name echoed like a curse. Powerful, ruthless, a man feared across Aqua Ibom's oil circles. And now, her future was bound to his will. Tears she had held back for years spilled freely. Ada, the bright graduate, the hopeful daughter, was becoming a pawn in a debt she never owed. The next morning, Ada barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The steady hands she once used to comfort others now trembled with fear. How does one counsel survivors when she herself feels trapped in a nightmare? Her father came to her room, his face heavy with defeat. "2 years ago, I made a mistake. I borrowed from Collins Udoh," he confessed. "He saved the company, but I couldn't pay him back. Now the price is you." Ada's world crumbled. Dreams dissolved into cold reality. Her education, her freedom, traded for survival. The following days passed in a haze for Ada. The weight of her father's words pressed down on her, yet she moved through each moment with a quiet determination to survive the impossible. The once comforting walls of the Essien mansion felt like cold bars, trapping her in a fate she had not chosen. One morning, as the sun painted soft gold across the manicured garden, a convoy of sleek black SUVs rolled through the gates of Ikot Ekpeni Estate. Ada stood on the balcony of her room, her gaze fixed on the arriving figure. She had tried to imagine Collins Udoh, expecting a grizzled magnate, a man whose power was only matched by his arrogance. But nothing had prepared her for the man who stepped out with such calm command. Tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, Collins moved with the certainty of one who owned not just land and oil fields, but the very air around him. His dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, met Ada's briefly before she turned away, cheeks burning with a mix of fear and silent rebellion. Their meeting was swift and cold. The grand sitting room, usually filled with light and laughter during festivities, now held only silence, broken by Collins's low, final voice. "The wedding is in 1 week. I don't care if you like it or not." Ada's fists clenched. "You can't buy me. I'm not property." "You are mine now," he said smoothly, his words cutting through the room like a blade. Her father remained silent, his gaze averted, and Madame Ifunanya watched with an unreadable expression. Ada's world shrank to the cold edges of that room, the reality sinking deeper. She was utterly alone. The days to the wedding blurred, a whirlwind of ceremonial beads, traditional rites, and the flashing eyes of paparazzi, turning her life into spectacle. Dressed in coral beads and the weight of obligation, Ada felt like prey on display, a beautiful sacrifice to an unfeeling altar. Collins's presence was a shadow at her side, never warm, never comforting. When he finally took her hand before the crowd, his whispered words chilled her to the bone. "Do what you must, then go back to your room." That night, watching fireworks light the sky, Ada's heart fractured. She had dreamed of love, partnership, and choice. Instead, she was bound by silence, shame, and a man who claimed ownership without a single touch of kindness. Ada woke the morning after her wedding in a room too large, too silent. The expensive coral beads she'd worn were now folded in a corner, symbols of a ceremony that had sealed her fate rather than celebrated love. The mansion around her was a palace of cold marble and empty hallways where every echo reminded her of the loneliness she felt deep inside. The day passed in quiet disarray until the door creaked open and Collins Udoh stepped inside. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. "You're awake," he said simply, eyes meeting hers for a moment before drifting away. "You're free to use the house as you please," he added, "but you're not to leave the estate." Ada's voice caught on the edge of disbelief. "So, I'm a prisoner now?" "You're a wife," he corrected, as if the word should soften the cage. For the first time, something flickered in Collins's eyes. Regret or pity, Ada couldn't tell. "I won't touch you. Not unless you ask me to." Those words, cold and distant, unsettled her more than any harsh command. It was a strange mercy wrapped in control. Days turned into weeks. Ada found refuge in the kitchen, where she cooked her own meals, ignoring the curious stares of the staff. The library became her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in books and the memories of the dreams she once held. Collins watched silently from the shadows of his office and corridors, studying her quiet strength. He saw how she treated the mansion, not as home, but as borrowed space. She spoke little, made no demands, and her silence was both haunting and peaceful. One evening, Ada sat on the balcony, the sprawling Udoh skyline glittering beneath her. She was a woman carved from solitude, unaware of the gaze that followed her every movement. Collins clenched his fist in the dim hallway, a man wrestling the weight of a growing ache, one born not from power, but from a quiet fear he could not name. The mansion seemed to breathe differently as days slipped into nights, each filled with unspoken words and a tension that neither Ada nor Collins dared to break. Collins had mastered the art of avoidance, leaving before dawn, returning after midnight, always a ghost in his own home. Yet, something within him stirred, a quiet unrest fueled by Ada's steadfast presence. One night, unable to sleep, Ada curled up in the vast library, rain tapping softly against the windows. Her thoughts spiraled. Why marry me if you want nothing from me? What does a man gain by punishing a woman for her father's debts? The tears she had bottled up now refused to be contained. At exactly 12:42 a.m., the mansion door clicked open. Collins entered, shoulders damp from the rain, eyes tired. At first, he didn't see her, until Ada stepped into the hallway, barefoot and resolute. "Why did you marry me?" she demanded, voice steady but fierce. His jaw clenched. "You know why." "No, I don't." she said, stepping closer. I know what you told my father, but I want to know why me? Why marriage? You could have taken the company, the house, the land. But you chose me. His silence thundered. You avoid me, watch me, control my movements, but refuse to speak. What do you want? What do you see when you look at me? For a moment, he seemed on the verge of walking away. Instead, he whispered, I see peace. And I don't know what to do with peace. You scare me, he confessed, voice low. Not because you're loud or angry, but because you're still here. You haven't broken down. You haven't begged. You just are. Ada met his gaze. Then talk to me. Talking opens doors I've locked for years, he said softly. Maybe it's time to unlock them, she replied. That night, for the first time, Collins did not disappear into the shadows. He sat across from her, and slowly, stories began to surface. Of a cold father, a lost mother, a man hardened by pain and fear. Ada listened, not as a therapist, but as a woman beginning to see the man behind the walls. In the weeks that followed their fragile breakthrough, Ada and Collins began to share more than silence. Yet beneath the tentative peace lay an unspoken battle. Collins, despite his composed exterior, was fighting a relentless enemy, his worsening cancer. One early morning, a sudden sharp pain cut through the mansion's quiet. A crash echoed from upstairs. Ada raced toward the sound, heart pounding. She found Collins collapsed on the marble bathroom floor, pale and drenched in sweat, clutching his abdomen. Collins! Can you hear me? She cried, dropping to her knees beside him. Groaning, barely conscious, he managed a faint nod. Ada's mind raced. She shouted for help and dialed Hopewell Medical Center, her voice trembling as she explained the emergency. At the hospital, the sterile white walls and harsh lights felt surreal. Doctors moved quickly, and soon the diagnosis was clear. Colon cancer, aggressive and advanced. Collins had faced this battle before. It had returned with a vengeance. Hours of waiting stretched into a night of fear and uncertainty. When the doctor finally emerged, he confirmed the grim reality. Surgery and chemotherapy were necessary, and the road ahead would be grueling. Ada stayed by Collins's bedside, her head resting on the cool edge as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. He opened his eyes to find her there, silent, steadfast. She became his anchor, coordinating medications, sitting through endless treatments, cooking meals tailored to his weakened body, and gently holding his hand during sleepless nights. Though Collins resisted her care, fearing weakness, Ada's presence became the strength he never knew he needed. One evening, as tears quietly escaped down his cheeks, Collins confronted a new pain, the vulnerability of being loved and not knowing how to receive it. Ada saw every side of him, the angry man, the scared boy, the weary fighter, and she stayed, not out of obligation, but because love had quietly taken root. Months passed as Collins endured the harsh trials of treatment. The shadows beneath his eyes deepened, but slowly, strength returned to his frame. Ada remained unwavering, her presence a steady light in the darkest hours. Their home began to change. The cold, formal mansion softened with blankets draped over couches, dog-eared books on tables, and the faint scent of freshly cooked akara drifting from the kitchen. The rigid walls echoed less with silence and more with the rhythms of life rebuilt. But beneath this fragile new normal, fear lingered. Collins dreaded dependence, the vulnerability of needing another. One morning, Ada found a letter folded neatly on her pillow, his handwriting neat but heavy with finality. Sarah, it began, though she was Ada now in heart and soul. You stayed when you didn't have to. You gave me your time, your energy, and what I now realize was your heart. I never deserved it. This marriage was born of debt, but I have paid the price, not with money, but with illness and humility. I am setting you free. Enclosed is a check to start over anywhere. You are not mine to keep. Ada's hands trembled as she read. Fury burned through her grief. That evening, she confronted Collins as he entered from a meeting. You think you can just write a goodbye like it's a business memo? She snapped, holding the letter aloft. I stayed through chemotherapy, not for charity. I want you. I want the man who held my hand in the dark, the one who is afraid, but still needs love. He blinked, tears quietly forming. And you? Do you want me? Her voice softened. I want this, even if it's messy, imperfect, and hard. For the first time, Collins let himself be vulnerable. I want you more than I know how to say. Their embrace was raw and fragile, the beginning of a love forged in fire. The mansion, once a cold fortress, now echoed with laughter, soft, hesitant, but genuine. Collins and Ada found comfort not in grand gestures, but in shared routines, morning prayers, midday tea, barefoot walks through tiled halls. The weight of illness remained, but so did hope. One afternoon, after a visit from Udoh, Collins's longtime friend, a quiet conversation unfolded. You're soft now, Obina teased, watching Collins braid Ada's hair on the terrace. Collins smiled, a sound long absent. The strongest thing I've ever done, he confessed later, was let myself be cared for. Ada's eyes sparkled without words. Healing had come not only through medicine, but through trust and surrender. Months later, Collins placed a delicate coral bracelet around Ada's wrist, the same bracelet his late mother had worn, a symbol of family, love, and legacy. She would have liked you, he said softly. Ada touched the beads, her heart swelling with the unspoken promise of acceptance. She still hadn't changed her name on her documents, not out of spite, but to protect her identity and autonomy. Then one evening, Collins found her sorting through passports and certificates, her face calm and resolute. Which name will you use at the psychology conference in Ghana next month? He asked gently. She held up her badge. Adaobi Essien Udoh, because this time I choose it. Under the garden lanterns, fingers intertwined and knees touching, Ada pulled out the letter Collins had written, her reminder that they had both chosen courage over fear. We should get married again, Collins murmured, eyes bright. Properly, you in the dress you choose, me without the shadow of debt. Ada smiled. Would you say yes? I already did, he said, but this time I'll say it with joy. 3 months later, under the soft coral skies of Ibano Beach, Ada and Collins stood barefoot on the white sand. The sea breeze tangled Ada's hair, and the distant waves whispered promises of renewal. Family and friends gathered, not for spectacle, but to witness a union born of healing and choice. There were no flashing cameras, no heavy expectations, only quiet smiles and warm embraces. Collins gently placed the coral bracelet back on Ada's wrist, his voice steady as he spoke his vows. Adaobi, you were once the price, but today, you are my choice, my partner, my strength. Tears glistened in Ada's eyes. She whispered back, I was the price they paid, but now I am the one who chooses. With all my heart, I choose you. Their hands joined, not out of obligation or debt, but from a love tested by pain and strengthened by grace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ada and Collins faced the future together, not as prisoner and owner, but as equals bound by respect, hope, and a love that was wholly their own. The story of Adaobi Essien Udoh was no longer one of sacrifice, but of courage, redemption, and the power of choice.